For all of his adult life, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led a peaceful struggle to bring racial equality to America. But change has never been easy.
I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
The day after he spoke these words, the man who spent his life preaching peace died a violent death. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. Martin Luther King Jr. was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1929. Growing up, he discovered that America's promise of equality was not true for its black citizens. For people of color, water fountains for whites were off limits. So were white schools, white jobs, and even white friends. But Martin Luther King never let racist attitudes hold him back, starting with his education. He entered Morehouse College at age 15. When he was only 18, he became a minister in his father's church. He graduated at the top of his seminary class and then earned a PhD in theology. In spite of all these personal accomplishments, Martin Luther King still faced discrimination as an African American, but he was about to do something about it.
Just the other day, one of the fine citizens of our community, Mrs. Rosa Parks, was arrested because she refused to give up her seat for a white passenger.
In many cities in the 1950s, African American citizens had to ride at the back of the bus. When Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to move to the back of the bus, Dr. King organized a bus boycott.
At present, we are in the midst of a protest. 90% at least of the regular Negro bus passengers are staying off the buses, and we plan to continue until something is done.
It was the first time an entire black community had come together to fight for their rights, and they did so peacefully, even when Dr. King was arrested, and even when his home was bombed.
We still have the attitude of love. We still have the method of passive resistance, and we are still insisting emphatically that violence is self-defeating, that he who lives by the sword will perish by the sword.
It took 11 months, and in the end, the black community did win. The United States Supreme Court ordered the buses to desegregate. Martin Luther King wanted to change many things about this country that he saw as unfair to African Americans, and he wanted to make these changes peacefully. He led nonviolent marches, sit-ins, and freedom rides. Civil rights protesters faced arrests, and fire hoses, and tear gas, and police dogs, and even beatings. But Dr. King set an example of peaceful perseverance. The news media publicized the struggle for civil rights and highlighted Dr. King's efforts. His leadership in the struggle had long been recognized by the African American community. And in 1964, the rest of the world recognized it too, when Dr. King became the youngest person ever to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Some people saw Dr. King's nonviolent approach as weakness, but he had faith in the American system of law. He believed that change could come if Americans could understand the injustice of segregation.
Because I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
His nonviolent approach brought that dream within reach. When black protesters refused to strike back, Americans of all races were outraged by the attacks. That increased the number of people who supported civil rights, and that put pressure on politicians, who then passed new laws outlawing segregation and discrimination. When Martin Luther King died, he left behind his wife, Coretta Scott King, and 4 children. But he also left behind an example for us to follow, and he left a legacy of change that now benefits all Americans. The civil rights movement he helped establish for African Americans paved the way for others to claim their rights too, such as women, the disabled, and the elderly. Today, a national holiday honors the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., an American who changed America.